It's time to sit back, relax, and listen to Conversations with Joan. Conversations with Joan will inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. And now, here's your host, Joan Herman.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life's Conversations with Joan. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Conversations with Joan focuses on topics that are important to your life, from health and wellness to professional development to personal well-being. Change makers join me to share their insights, tips, and strategies so you can thrive and live your best life now. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and thank you for letting us be a part of your life. Now, let's start talking. After a traumatic past, which includes kidnapping and physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, today's guest Doug Dane beat the odds stacked against him to find happiness and success in his own life. Doug's work is inspired by the steps he took to overcome the typical trajectory for someone in his shoes. He offers guidance to help us break into a new life, no matter what we may have experienced. Doug is a mindset mentor, speaker, mental health advocate, and author of Mistaken Identity, a guide to letting go of a past that's holding you back. Welcome, Doug. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Nice to be here.
So, Doug, I want to start off by talking a little bit more about you and your life story.
Yeah, sure. I guess I kind of start in the middle of the life story. So it was basically 2001. I was about 39 years old, and my second marriage had failed. All my relationships had failed, or I had wrecked them. And I was a good guy, and I was doing well in parts of my life, but for some reason, I just kept wrecking relationships. So I ended up in counseling, and the lady was started asking me some typical questions they ask you in terms of family history, and I didn't have a lot of answers. And she said, "Well, your way's not working. If you want to have a better future, you might want to figure out your past, because I think there's something in your past, abuse of some sort." And I said, there's no abuse in my past. I didn't recall anything like that. I remembered my parents being alcoholic. And so I went on this investigation, and I literally, I hired a private investigator. I got records from my adoption. I was adopted as a 6-month-old baby. I got social services records from Children's Aid, it was called at that time. I interviewed teachers, friends, family, neighbors, etc. And I pieced together a story. And so I got dropped into this violent alcoholic home as a baby. And my parents were really violent towards each other. So we witnessed a lot of violence as little kids. I adopted a brother. He was adopted before I got there. And anyway, so the first 13 years of my life were witnessing violence and being on the other end of emotional and physical abuse, primarily at the hands of my mom, but also, of course, watching my dad mistreat and beat my mom. And at 13, I literally threw my mom out of the house. My parents were fighting. I picked her up, carried her outside, called the police, and they came and took her away. She never came back. And then I went, as I say, looking for love in all the wrong places. And I was skipping school and out wandering the streets all the time. I ended up in this ring of pedophiles and sexually abused over 2 years by between 4 men. There was 23 boys in this ring. And at 15, and that ended in kidnapping. The guy that was abusing me primarily was trying to escape arrest. It was on the news, and the police were on the trail of these men. And so we left for a week and then came back. And then that, of course, coping turned to drugs and alcohol. I was drunk and stoned from basically 15 to 23. Didn't finish high school. I barely made it into grade 10, and then just working in jobs. I came from a very poor family, and so I was, working in sort of a blue collar environment. And then I got into business at 23. I don't know what got me into that, but failed miserably. I had a couple of businesses, got into business with a bad guy, and ended up going bankrupt, landing on my feet. And then finally I figured out how to earn money. And so I became successful in business. So that was basically 25 through 40. And then this relationship fails. All this story comes out that I just told you. And I got this bright idea that in order to let go of it all, I felt that the truth would make me free. So I wrote my story and it was on the national newspaper here in Canada. Then I was on national television, and then people asked me to start speaking, and people were coming to me going, "How did you go from that violent, traumatic childhood and all the trauma, guilt, and shame that goes along with it? How did you break free?" And I broke free in some respects, but not in all respects. And so that point then began a pursuit to figure out how did I do it and how could I tell you or help you, because 60% back then and still today, 60% of adults have suffered some form of adverse childhood experience, whether it be emotional, physical, sexual abuse, or witnessing violence. And so I've been on a pursuit ever since, and that's kind of the Coles notes.
Everything that you just described, any one of those things could have completely destroyed a person. And
Yes.
Did you ever have a time when you started to feel sorry for yourself? You got into that victim mentality.
Oh, all the time. Yeah. I mean, it was a real, I say to people that I work with, like, we're real hypocrites. And what I mean by that is I was, saying one thing and doing another, pretending one thing and feeling another. So I was a really great actor, meaning that I acted like I had it all together. And I did have it together with respect to my career, and I was a good person, and people liked me, and I was a nice guy. But internally, for the longest time, I just kept going, what the heck is wrong with me? And so up until where the article came out, or the story came out, I just had this lingering feeling that I was depressed and anxious and nervous, uncomfortable around the people. One of the chapters in my book is called Sweaty Palms, Big Heart, because I'd sweat all the time whenever I was around with people. And I really struggled. I didn't know why. And then the story came out, and that, of course, explained a lot. And then I was able to release, like, literally when I went public, the guilt and the shame of the story all fell away, and my perception on it changed dramatically. And that's what really was a big part of the healing, is I just changed my perception on the story, that it was a gift, not a curse. And so almost immediately that changed. But 2000 through to now, even up until a couple of years ago, I was still still struggling with these things, and just this lingering feeling, and even being aware that I had it and unable to shake it. And so, of course, I definitely experienced those feelings.
And I understand when you say that we're all good actors, because that was my life. When I started this work came out of the result of a lot of pain and trauma in my life. And in a period of 5 months, my 23-year marriage ended, my mom died, my sister died, my son left for school. So it's like I had this life one day, and then it was just completely ripped away from me. And so I started doing this work around changing your attitude, changing your life. And really that started, there wasn't a whole lot of thought behind it. It was just because I knew I had to get my head in the game if I was going to survive any of this. And so I would go out during the day, because I'm the rock for everyone. So I was this strong person, and everyone saw me as, like you said, all together. And I would go home at night and lie in the fetal position on the floor and sob. And so you're right. We are actors. And when you make that decision that I can no longer stay that way, and you rewrite the story, because that's what I did as well. I started to shift the way I saw the things. Instead of, why are all these things happening to me? I started to believe that they were happening to help me, to grow, to be a better person. That was really a turning point for me.
It's good.
Yeah. And I think, that's why so many people do stay stuck, because they don't make that decision and say, I no longer want to live this way. I want something different.
It's hard, and when I say that, that's the standard answer people give me, is that it's hard, and so the perception is that it is very hard. It's complicated. It takes a long time, because the way we've approached this, these kinds of situations and stories and experiences, the methodology and the modalities, I guess, we use to deal with our suffering, our pain, our trauma, is just kind of methods we followed for a long time, and they don't really work very well. They don't happen very, very quickly. And so I struggled for a long time, and I met my last mentor I worked with for 8 years, and And he really got me to see that I was making it complicated. I was making it hard. It could happen really, really quickly. But what most people don't know, and it's very frustrating, is there's a few things that have gone on since we were little. And, no matter what your age is, I'm almost 60 now. No matter what your age is, whether you're 20, 60, or 80, when you were little, there was a few things happening while you were growing up and trying to find your way. So we were brought up with a huge compulsion to conformity, and basically falling into line, wanting to be liked, wanting to be approved, validated, accepted, all that stuff, wanting to fit in. And that also bred a feeling or a fear of worrying about what people think, fear of criticism. And so, it is difficult to make that. It's easy for you and I to say, hey, just make a decision, Joan or Doug, and your life can change. But the perception is that it's hard. And it's also fueled by, social media now these days, but, the whole I call it the self-help industry. I mean, I was brought up in that, trying to read books to try to find out what's wrong with me. What I discovered was I had this mistaken identity. And the big question I kept asking myself my whole life, and I think most people do, goes, what's wrong with me? And everybody else is asking the same question. What the heck's wrong with you, Dougie Dane? And my teacher's going, what's wrong with you? And my bosses, what's wrong with you? And I'm going, what's wrong with me? Mm-hmm. But I never got an answer. And I finally realized why I never got the answer. Because there is nothing wrong with me. What's wrong, I've been asking the wrong question. What's wrong is what's wrong with what I believe? What's wrong with how I was treated? What's wrong with what and who I'm following? So I just tell people, stop trying to fix yourself. The key is to be yourself. And it's difficult to be yourself in today's society, because to break out of that into, living with your true self, there's a lot of upward pressure.
Yeah. And the thing also is, none of us like change. We like things the way they are, and we're comfortable, even if it's being comfortable in our misery, but it's what we know. Yeah. And it is hard to break out from that. And you're right. We can sit here and say, oh, just take the step, make the choice. But it is the hardest thing you will ever do. And it's not like you flip a switch and you make the choice and everything is wonderful and you move into, rainbows and sunshine. That's not how it works. But no. It is deciding at some point I can no longer stay where I am and do things the same way, day in and day out, expecting a different result.
Yeah, and you mentioned victim mentality. I mean, I definitely carried around a victim mentality. I was a victim, but only until I was 15. Mm-hmm. Then you could say I was a victim of that caused me to be stuck in drugs and alcohol and mental health problems. And you just keep linking the victim mentality throughout your whole life, and just keep bridging to the next bridge to give you excuses to stay stuck and suffer. But we don't have to live that way. And I think, unfortunately, for many people, it takes something dramatic to give you the wake up call or the slap in the face to make the change. But it can be a lot easier for us than we think. But our perception is that it's hard. And I just say to people, like, and my mentor said to me, like, Doug, are you happy in your life most of the time? No. Do you experience joy relatively often? No. Are you struggling? Yes. Well, is your way working? No. And I think we have to be honest with ourselves and, just really ask ourselves some serious questions as to whether we want to do anything about it. But it's very easy to suffer and stay in sort of the victim mentality. And being a victim is actually, very, very convenient. Mm-hmm. And it gives you lots of excuses and alibis. But we don't have to suffer as we are. Life is actually what I discovered. And I didn't know this. There's a couple of things I didn't know. My mentor kept saying, Doug, like, life is actually quite simple. You're making it hard. And the reason it's hard on you is because of the way you think. And I didn't know what he meant. So I discovered a few things. One is I did not know that my mind actually directs my brain and nervous system. I was not aware of that. I didn't know anything about mindset or how my mind actually operated. I learned that our mind is actually a machine. We're not a machine, but we have this machine. We're the operator, and if it directs my brain and nervous system, I probably should learn how the machine operates, follow some simple rules, and so we break those rules all the time. One is we spend way too much time worrying about the future, and we were just simply taught to do that. So all anxiety is fear of the future. That's all you're doing is you're worrying about something that hasn't happened that you can't control. It creates anxiety, turns into depression. And then frustration is simply looking backwards on the past with guilt or regret. And regret turns into resentment, and guilt turns into shame. And our mind does not operate that way. Our mind only operates properly in the present moment, much like a GPS. Our mind's just like a GPS. It operates in the moment, course correcting you turn by turn as you drive. And we have to start operating our mind properly. And I didn't also know that this machine is also run by our self-image, or our opinion of ourselves. And our opinion of ourselves got distorted and is distorted by how we were treated or how we were raised. Even if you grew up in a nice family, I got a message from a guy that read the book yesterday, and he grew up in a good family, but he's off track too, because all the rules, values, beliefs, bias, prejudice that he was handed don't line up for him, and he thinks there's something wrong with them. And so we just got to get clear on a few simple things, and then life doesn't have to be so difficult. It's always going to, it's going to be rainy some days, it's going to be sunny some days, it's going to be bad weather, it's going to be good weather. That's just life. It's how we view our problems and how we approach our problems and how we view our story determines how we view our future. And so if you're willing to accept the idea that this actually could be simpler, because I wasn't, for me, literally 8 years to finally accept the idea that it was simple. And then when I did, then it got really simple and easy.
Doug, for someone who's listening to us right now and wants to make the type of changes that you've been talking about, what is the best advice you can offer that person to get started?
Well, I think it depends on how you want to do it. If you want to do it by yourself, a lot of people want to do this by themselves because they don't want to admit what they're struggling with. But I think the starting point always is decision. You have to ask yourself a couple of questions I just mentioned, and that is my way working? Am I struggling? There must be a better way, because we're not living naturally. That's why we're in such conflict, because we don't operate naturally. We're operating just on learned behavior that makes us feel bad. So I think the first step is decision. Ask yourself a couple of questions. I think it'd be a good idea. I don't think you have to go into your past too much. You don't want to dwell on your past. I didn't dwell on my past. I just simply assembled my past. So my mentors kept saying, hey, do not stay stuck in the past. Do not focus on the past. At least assemble a little bit of information that can kind of explain how you got here and why you believe what you do or why you feel the way you do about yourself. And that's basically what my book is designed to do, is to kind of realize, what is a mistaken identity? What is yours and how did you get it? Because you have to learn that in order to unlearn that. And so I think, you could do what I did and gather a bit of information and facts, even get your pen out and ask yourself a couple of questions. Where did I get all my beliefs from? Where am I struggling in my life? What are the areas? What are the problems I'm facing? It all comes down to belief. Everything is run off belief. So you just have to ask yourself, what are the beliefs I have that are causing me to do what I do and causing me to struggle? You might want to go, if you've been through a traumatic situation like me, you might want to talk to somebody professional. It's a counselor that can extract the story. But I warn people, don't stay in counseling or therapy, because generally you just continue to talk about the past, and that's where you stay stuck. At some point you have to, once you've assembled it, then you have to let it go. I think that would be the starting point. And I think I'd also find somebody that has freed themselves from a similar story like you or like me, and just follow one person. Stop following, everybody. Stop buying all these books. Stop listening to all these YouTube videos. Just find one person that you resonate with and follow them like a guide taking you up the mountain. Those would be some things I'd suggest.
The book is Mistaken Identity, A Guide to Letting Go of a Past That's Holding You Back. If you'd like to learn more about Doug and his work, you can visit DougDane.com. Doug, in our final moments, what is the takeaway? What would you like to leave our listeners with?
Well, probably a few things. One, as I said earlier, stop trying to fix yourself. And the key is to start being yourself in spite of this pressure for conformity and fear of what people are going to think. When you stop worrying about what people are thinking about you, you'll realize that they very rarely do. And if you stop thinking about yourself so much, you won't find anything wrong with yourself. And if you're going to get the book, don't buy the book to fix yourself or to work on you. Let the book actually work on you. The book is designed actually as a process. It's more of a workbook than a book that you'd read. I take you over a process literally over 30 days, 30 chapters, 30 principles, and 30 questions I ask you to get you moving fast so you can let go quickly. And I think just for all the people, 60% of the people that have been through these adverse childhood experiences, the big thing that got me to let go quickly of it was I just realized and accepted the idea that it didn't happen because of me. It simply happened to me. It could have happened to any little boy. It happened to happen to me, but I'm still here and I'm still going, and life doesn't have to be so hard.
And once again, Doug's book is Mistaken Identity, A Guide to Letting Go of a Past That's Holding You Back. Doug, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Joan. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. I hope you found the show informative. At Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life, we believe that knowledge is power. Take what you've learned, apply it, and live your best life now. Remember that the information provided is the opinion of our guest and should never replace the advice of a professional who knows your personal situation. If you'd like more information, visit our website, cyacyl.com. That stands for Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. While on our site, listen to past shows on demand, read the digital magazine, sign up for our mailing list, and be sure to follow the show on social media. Until next time, this is Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.